two.
Hey, everybody. Elisa, can you hear me over there? Okay, don't worry about it. All right. Hey, everybody. Sorry. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Disruptive Chaos. We took a break last week, and we are streaming live on Instagram. No, bring it over here. My daughter's helping me because we're trying to get to as many people as possible today to watch what's going to be a really good show. So again, thank you. We hope that everybody's safe, everybody's taking care of themselves, and we are going to get right to our show. So Elisa, you got to Instagram the show. So bring that so that can be seen. My daughter's helping me out, everybody. All right.
Yeah, I got it.
You got it? Okay, hold on. Thank you. All right, everybody, thanks for bearing with me. First and foremost, I want to thank everybody that's watching. I want to thank our producer, and I want to thank my two guests that I called at the last minute, and I really appreciate that they were both able to come on. We pulled this together really quickly today, and we hope to really have a very good conversation, a very political and necessary conversation. Our guest with us today is Ed Morales, as well as Roberto Lovato, and I want to bring them on. And if Tandy, if we can play that first clip of Lin-Manuel Miranda, if we can cue that up.
We spoke out on the day of the Pulse shooting. We spoke out when Vice President Mike Pence came to our show 10 days after the election. And we have not yet firmly spoken the inarguable truth that Black Lives Matter and denounced systemic racism and white supremacy in our official Hamilton channels is a moral failure on our part. As the writer of the show, I take responsibility and apologize for my part in this moment here. Sorry for not pushing harder and faster for us to speak these self-evident truths under the Hamilton banner, which has come to mean so much. Hamilton doesn't exist without the Black and brown artists who created and revolutionized and changed the world through the culture, music, and language of hip-hop. Literally, the idea of the show, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist without the brilliant Black and brown artists in our cast, crew, and production team who breathe life into this story every time it's performed. And while we live in a country where Black people are under attack from emboldened white supremacy, police brutality, and centuries of systemic anti-Black racism, it's up to us in words and deeds to stand up for our fellow citizens. It's up to us to do the work to be better allies and have each other's backs. Attached to this post are a list of resources and organizations doing hard, necessary work in this fight. Thank you to all the alumni and company members and fans for holding us accountable. Thank you for everyone who stands on the side of justice. History has its eyes on all of us. Good night.
Yeah, history does has its eyes on not only all of us. History has its eyes on Lin-Manuel Miranda and a lot of the destructive things that he has supported when it comes to Puerto Rico, and we really want to unpack that. So Ed, if you could unmute your mic. And then Roberto, I'm the same way. I have a lot of papers, but we'll be able to hear them. So we have to be softer when we're shuffling all of the things all around us because we have a lot to go over. Well, look, let me start with a post. It's pretty clear and concise, this post. So I'm just going to show it. I'll read it. My mom and everybody hates when I curse my elders, but I didn't write this, so I'm going to read it. Fuck, period. Lin, period. Manuel, period. Fuck Hamilton as a president. Man, cast, play, rap group, Disney ride, and statue. It's hanging on my wall now. It will be right there. And a lot of people feel that way, but what I have found in this last week is that I had a conversation with Roberto and Brother David Garlasa from the Justice Committee. We've been comrades for a very, very long time. And many of you might remember that about 6 months ago when American Dirt came out, it was Roberto and comrades of his, a lot of sisters, that they started the Dignidad literary campaign and really pushed Oprah to have this quasi come to Jesus town hall for the woman who wrote the book, right? And they did get a lot of concessions around, Latino authors, almost non-existent. Less than 1% of the publishing world are Latinos of any Latino, Indigenous, Afro-Latinos, any Latinos. It was a very successful campaign. So as I saw that the movie was coming out on Disney and streaming live, right? I have been a critic of Lin-Manuel Miranda and his father and the Hispanic Federation for a very long time. I especially became a harder critic in 2016 when Lin-Manuel, against the advice of many Puerto Ricans on the island, in the diaspora, scholars, young people, asked him not to support Promesa, which we're going to have Ed really break down what Promesa is and what it continues to do on the island. It essentially gave the fiscal control of the island to 7 or 8, 9 Wall Street hedge fund people that decide, you can open up a school, or no, this year you're not going to have books for your school. And then continue to be critical of him. He's done a deal with Nespresso to now bring coffee to Puerto Rico, even though people in Puerto Rico grow coffee and what they needed was not Nespresso and George Clooney. What Lin-Manuel should have done with all the money that was raised post-Hurricane Maria, we're talking multi-millions of dollars. That money should have all gone to the farmers in Puerto Rico to keep their land. That money should have gone to build a hospital in Vieques, so if you get sick in Vieques, you don't have to wait and get a ferry to Fajardo, where there's the closest hospital, right? So there's been a lot of critiques. And then here we are within what Roberto brilliantly wrote when we'll pull up our petition that we started, that the country right now is having a racial political reckoning. And one of those reckoning is people are not waiting, they're tearing down statues. And here in Albany, the mayor, without anybody asking, quickly took down the Philip Schuyler statue and has temporarily closed the museum until the truth of the Schuyler family can now be in the museum. She gets credit for that, but that's really because of all the incredible young people here and all over the world, not only demanding that Black Lives Matter and end to police violence and state violence, but younger people are also looking at everything systematically. And part of looking at things systematically is that we have to look at culture. So Hamilton is just not a play. It's been a juggernaut of a play. It has made hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. There are Hamilton, not now with COVID, but cast all over in all different cities. He even brought it to Puerto Rico, which was a complete, utter failure. The students in Puerto Rico said, do not bring this. They protested him. He then not only brings them, the tickets were like $1,000. And then he had this weekend with all these Hollywood people at the Dorado Resort, which is one of the places that was taken from the people to make this high resort. So unless you know a lot of this history, right, then you're just like, it's a play. But is it? Is it just a play? No, it's not a play, because hundreds of thousands of students have seen Hamilton. So their belief is that Hamilton was like a really good guy. He had nothing to do with slavery. He had an affair here and there. And if it wasn't for him, there would have been no American Revolution. So when we started talking, I did feel that I felt we would get thousands of people to sign. And as of now, we've only gotten 400 people to sign our petition, which we'll also go through. But I put up a post that said, cancel Hamilton. And in the 12 years I've been on social media, I have never had a post like this ever engaged. It reached 59,000 people, 22,000 engagements, over 10,000 shares, and 900 comments. And unfortunately, I went down the rabbit hole of reading the comments, which I normally don't do. But when a friend of mine said, somebody just posted that they want to rape you. When a friend of mine said, yo, I think your address is on Instagram, somebody is doxing you. When someone posted, the problem with you is you need, quote, good DICK because you're a Nazi lesbian feminist, which actually would not be, I wouldn't take that as a critique. I just don't happen to be a lesbian. But I would take the Nazi as a critique, but not a feminist or a lesbian, you know? When they start, posting things about my looks, my daughter, then my comrades and stuff, it really took me down the last couple of days. So I shouldn't have gone down that rabbit hole, but because it has garnered so much and people are really in their feelings. And lastly, I'm like, is Lin-Manuel Miranda paying your rent? Is he buying the food? Is he
gotta wonder
if he's is he building a hospital? Is he in Puerto Rico right now where people still can't get tested with COVID? So I'll end my little editorial I'm writing a really, really long article about this because it took me back to a moment when I was in college. And I was in college and I brought up a speaker that people will know as maybe Stokely Carmichael, but at the end of his life, Kwame Ture, who actually coined the term Black Power. And in the early 90s, he was a regular lecturer on campuses all over. And because he was within the All African People's Revolutionary Party, he was labeled anti-Semitic. And we all know that once you're labeled anti-Semitic, or anti-Zionist, I mean, they come for you. Like they come for you. I was president of the Black Alliance, and even because I brought him, my house got broken in twice. Our office did as well. But when we brought him, we weren't allowed to, and we snuck him in on campus. And the reason we weren't allowed to is because the president of that time, a Black president, H. Patrick Swigert, was making a deal in Israel. And they said if Kwame Ture came to speak at SUNY Albany, here in Albany, New York, that they would pull the satellite campus deal. So with the help of our custodian brothers and sisters, we snuck him in on campus into the biggest lecture center. Over 700 people were there ready for me to say he couldn't come. We didn't bring him. The doors opened and to this day, I'll never forget the electricity in the room. But by the end of the day, the 3 highest level administrators who were woken up from bed and were waiting for us told me that I needed to get myself on campus, that I was going to be immediately expelled. The next day I got a call to go to my hearing, my judicial hearing. They wouldn't let me bring in a lawyer, but they did. The faculty, the Black Studies faculty and Latino Studies faculty, demanded that one of our professors, who became my mentor until she passed away, Dr. Vivian Verdell Gordon, came. And, they were just like, at this point, you either take the expulsion or we're going to suspend ASUBA for the next 2 years. And at that time, ASUBA was one of the largest and longest Black student organizations throughout New York State. And I was about to say, take the L. And then I just started hearing, if Rosa goes, we go. If Rosa goes, we go, for over an hour. And my professor, Dr. Gordon, whispered at me and said, you now have to choose. What side are you on? You're either on freedom's side or you're going to walk away like a coward. You go back in there and you say you're staying, and the people got your back. And the reason I talk about that is when Kwame Ture was dying of cancer, he did his last lecture at Cornell University, and I was a student there. And I sat with Kwame Ture, 8 of us, for over 6 hours. He told us about the Brown Berets. He told us about colonialism in Puerto Rico. He told us about Garveyism. He told us stories. He told Young Lord stories. He talked about international solidarity. He talked about the power of culture and how culture can be propaganda for good or bad. And the last thing he said is, the people that will most disappoint you are going to be your own people, because they will be easily bought with money, with awards, with magazine covers. They will become the visible leaders who will not stand with the people. And that's what's happening now with Hamilton and Lin-Manuel. We are telling people where Lin stands, and we have our own people who are taking millions of dollars from him and are literally on the wrong side of history. If you're going to take that money, which is blood money, what are you using it for salaries or conventions? Or are you trying to actually build institutions in our community? I think you're using it for salaries and parties and conventions, because I see no institution building happening right now. And when the Puerto Rican people tell you that Lin-Manuel's problematic, and you as a non-Puerto Rican still take his money, you are now problematic. And to me, that is dangerous, and you might as well be an enemy. And we don't need to be fighting y'all, but now we have to fight you. So with that, I want to first, introduce Ed Morales, who's an author, journalist. For me, I everything Ed writes, everywhere he appears, I am there. I am listening. He had his own radio show, Living in Spanglish, on WBAI. He has had fellowships to research, been in the New York Times. He's a lecturer at Columbia University at the Study for Ethnicity and Race and CUNY Graduate School of Journalism. And his new book, which is phenomenal. I read it in 2 days. And I was with Ed, I think maybe 6 months ago, maybe a little longer. We both did an episode on Laura Flanders. I just really want everybody, because we're talking about Puerto Rico, please get this book. Right. And then we also have Roberto Lovato, who many of you know. He has been disrupting, I'm sure, as long as he's been alive. He's a journalist and a writer. His new book is coming out, a memoir that he's been working on for a couple years, called A Memoir: Family, Migration, Gangs, and Revolution in the Americas. He's a recipient of a reporting grant from the Pulitzer Center. He has reported on war, violence, terrorism in Mexico, Venezuela, El Salvador, Dominican Republic. He was a fellow at UC Berkeley's Latinx Research Center. He finished a teaching stint at UCLA, and he has been published everywhere: The Guardian, the Los Angeles Times, Der Spiegel, L'Opinion, other national and international publications, and he lives in San Francisco. So I really want to thank both of you. Thank you for bearing with my editorial, because I've been just angry and heartbroken and pissed, but then, that's the work that we do. So I guess starting with you, Ed, because in the book you do completely really break down very easily this colonialism, this exploitation, the betrayal of Puerto Rico. And your most recent piece was on CNN about Hamilton. So you wrote it. Why did you feel the need to write it? And how should we be looking at what is happening on the cultural level of Hamilton, and so much of the pushback of people saying, well, it's just a play, it's not real.
Yeah, I've been getting a lot of that. I mean, I'm sorry that you're getting all that stuff on social media. I got a lot of negative stuff about my piece at CNN, but it doesn't seem half as difficult as what you had to face. And also, I'm very surprised. Like, what, are they getting paid? That's what I thought. Because like, how can you be so obsessed with this? I would get people retweeting over and over the same thing, for hours. But look, I wrote this. Frankly, I've written a lot of things about Lin-Manuel Miranda, both in my book Latinx and in the Fantasy Island, and a couple of other things. And I was actually like I was hesitant about writing anything more because I kind of like didn't really want to be defined as someone who's always writing these things about Hamilton. But I felt that the moment that we're in now, where so much is going on, where there's more of a left analysis, there's more of a chance to get out some stronger points about the history of this country and colonialism and the founding of the country. And in fact, like the 1619 Project, one thing that was really disputed about that was the fact that they suggested at all that the Revolutionary War was fought in part because the colonists did not want, England wanted to abolish slavery. This Gerald Horne wrote this really excellent book about that, and he's got actually a new book coming out. Really a great African-American historian who actually explores a lot links between Black and brown people too, which is another reason I recommend him. So I felt like, this is really a chance to talk about. I also really wanted to show how what the play did connected very much with the neoliberal Democratic Party, and as like through his father, Lin-Manuel Miranda is very, very closely connected to the Democratic Party. And, the fact that Hamilton being made a hero really it fit in really well with the sort of Obama project of, well, look, Obama, he bailed out the Wall Street, but he didn't really help the working class. The Hamilton, when one of the points I've been wanting to make for a really long time was that he compromised. He says he wanted to end slavery, and there's a lot of research out there that says the Manumission Society really didn't really do much, in terms of really trying to abolish slavery. But at the same time, he tolerated all this slavery in his life. And then the way that the United States formed itself, which was really put into a challenge with the Civil War, was the northern states sort of tolerating the southern states having the slavery. And so Hamilton is really like right in the middle of that, and so I thought this is a really good chance to show how that politics of saying, all right, well, we got to listen to both sides, and and we're going to compromise, and eventually 8 or 9 Congresses down the road, we'll get the Civil Rights Act, and the idea that this guy was he was supposedly the one who maybe didn't favor slavery full bore, but what was one of the key people in setting up the Federal Reserve System, which was able to take all the money from slavery and make the North rich. So it's very much like a liberal Democrat, live in this nice apartment, say you're not racist, but getting all this money from exploitation of people in the U.S. and worldwide, and then they're the hero, and then that's who the play was written for, as and that's who the audience was. And it was so expensive to get in. Nobody saw it except when he did this program and got school children in. And, and then in terms of Puerto Rico, the presentation of Hamilton in Puerto Rico was done very much in concert with the same publicity machine that was exposed in the chat scandal that deposed Ricky Rosselló. There are several pictures of Lin-Manuel and his father with the same people
Right.
who were in the chat with Rosselló. And you know, that's never really been talked about. Well, how is it, you know, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but like, I know when someone is kind of, you know, cheesy, you know, you run into these people and, you know, these people have an agenda. So how is it they didn't know, you know, what agenda these people had and went along with this entire publicity machine? And then no one has really written about it, but there's a suggestion that, you know, a lot of the functions of what was going on during the play was a chance for Democratic legislators to meet with potential donors, you know, and that is one of the main things that actually that they're involved with. The whole Latino Victory and the Latino Victory PAC is about fundraising. And there's a lot of fundraising the Democratic Party does with people who favor statehood in Puerto Rico. You know, I don't know if people know this, but it's hard to see it because there are so many like right-wing Republicans in charge of the New Progressive Party of the, you know, which is a misnomer, of the statehood party in Puerto Rico. But over the last 30 years, there's a lot of Democratic, you know, statehooders who are registered as Democrats and who actually gave a lot of money to Obama. So it's that whole thing that's really summed up, and it's a kind of, it's a money-making machine that's tied up with lobbying. And, you know, and Hamilton, the Forbes article said it's now a $1 billion franchise, 649 million from Broadway, 167 from touring, etc. And it's, so the way they present themselves is that we are raising all this money and staying in the game. And then we have the Hispanic Federation and these philanthropic organizations that particularly they did the whole initiative in Puerto Rico to support the arts. And they are actually supporting some really good institutions there. But it's the price, you know, it's sort of like how people are paid off not to resist what they're doing, or not to really look into what they're doing. So I didn't get to say all that in the column, but I thought it was really important to show how what Alexander Hamilton did was really set this country up for, you know, the horrendous increase and you know, use of slavery to accumulate all this money, which culminated in the Civil War. And you know, and then we still haven't got past it. I mean, it's the same thing. You know, people are, you know, venerating the founding fathers, and that's why people can't, you know, or us white people or whatever, cannot get in touch with, you know, why, you know, Black people have been systematically, you know, destroyed, you know, in the country, basically.
Yeah, and we just had split screen and pulled up, and folks can go to CNN and read Ed's article. And you know, I think around all the comments, I mean, obviously there's always the level of patriarchy, right? Like, we as women get these type of rape comments and things like that. They're horrific. But I think just the level of almost how people feel so aggrieved, like they own it. And in fact, you know, and Roberto, to bring you in to talk about, you know, your perspective on it, and also like why you felt it was important that we start at this campaign and then go towards another one that will target Lin-Manuel and more like of what Ed was talking about, the Hispanic Federation and the Latino Victory Fund. And all of a sudden, like 2 weeks ago, statehood for Puerto Rico is trending, and you're like, who is doing all this kind of stuff? So, you know, Roberto, I mean, yeah, just the idea that it's almost like people are losing their shit because of critique. Meanwhile, he got 75, him and Jeffrey Seller, the producer, alone from Disney, got $75 million. And then in Puerto Rico, we can't even do anything right now because we have no money. But you also have a perspective of Central America and a global perspective for why is it necessary that during this racial political reckoning that we're under, that we do have this as part of that reckoning.
Well, that's a question for about 2 hours a week for the next semester. So I won't even begin try to answer that, especially after Ed, who's really tight on this stuff. And so I'm just going to start off by saying thank you, Rosa, for inviting me. As soon as you called, I responded to the call and joined Ed in being sorry that you're dealing with what happens when you touch the tiger in the place where the tiger doesn't like to be touched. Como decimos en buen salvadoreño, tocarle al tigre. So, and I know this is not new to you. You and many others in New York joined Presente.org and me when we launched a campaign on Lou Dobbs to get Lou Dobbs off of CNN. And speaking of culture, and we did that because of things that I learned in El Salvador that I'll talk about momentarily. But we did it because when you're going to enslave somebody, or whether you're going to perpetrate other violence against a human being, be it especially physical violence, or whether you're going to perpetrate violent policies, right? Because policy is a form of violence. It's a form of slow violence, slow death, slow destruction, sometimes fast destruction. Sometimes they're combined, but it's violent and destructive nonetheless. So to do that, elites have learned since Hamilton and long before that you need a cultural foundation, a narrative, in order to continue the repressive activities, whether it's policies or whether it's death squad killings like those I saw in El Salvador in the late 80s and early 90s that I talk about in my book. I love the way Ed kind of lays out in his work the continuum of culture and politics that goes from Washington, D.C. and Hollywood. But it's a circuit, right? They both benefit from each other economically and politically. And I think Alexander Hamilton is actually the perfect symbol of what my friend Robin Kelly or Ruthie Gordon call racial capitalism, the process by which people are profiting from the racial identity of, from others. So, Hamilton is rife with the profiting off of Black and brown bodies, acting like they're white bodies, because they're really not the white bodies that bought and sold enslaved Africans, or that, like Hamilton did, like Alexander Hamilton did. So he's a perfect symbol of a racial case. He's actually the father of racial capitalism. You think about it, in the United States, he's the founder of the Treasury. He was the first Minister of Finance of the United States, the global U.S. financial system being one of the instruments, along with the military, to control the world, right? You control it by instituting neoliberal economics, and then you bring the military in to quash any dissent, right? Which is what's happening inside the United States right now, which is why we're toppling statues and expressing the insurrectional sensibility that we all are feeling right now. And I say insurrectional very intentionally because, as you know, Rosa, and others may not until they read my book, man. Sorry to be promoting, but my agent and editors say I have to do that. So, but seriously, part of my book talks about my experience in El Salvador, where I was part of un movimiento revolucionario, a revolutionary movement that sought to overthrow the Salvadoran government, the fascist military dictatorship of El Salvador, backed by the United States, by Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan. It was a bipartisan effort. So part of what motivates me to get involved with the work that you and others are doing is obviously the cause of Black lives and Black Lives Mattering, and what the consciousness that's growing and the racial reckoning that we're having. But there's another part of me also that que es revolucionario, the revolutionary person, right? Like Alexander Hamilton or George Washington, I risked my life for my ideals. Unlike them, I didn't own slaves. I wasn't rich. I wasn't coming from an elite family. I didn't marry into an elite family. Very different revolution, the American Revolution, from, say, the French Revolution in many ways in the ideals. And so when we talk about Hamilton as being revolutionary, that's a problem for me politically as a revolutionary, right? Because they're taking the revolutionary banner, one of the most sacred values in the world right now. We need revolutionary thought and practice to overcome, you know, the legacy of slavery in the United States, to overcome the economic crisis, the neo-fascism, and then climate change. We need radical thought. So to have a play that somehow acts as if it's revolutionary or that it embodies revolutionary values is extremely dangerous to the political imagination of the United States and of the world right now. If you know, so my involvement in this has as much to do with that. And so moved by that, I thought, well, let's do something. And so I've been watching Lin-Manuel Miranda with Promesa, and I don't have much to add on the Puerto Rico side. You all have it more than very well analyzed. I do have something to add in terms of Lin-Manuel Miranda and the Democratic Party and their issues. The way his work around the Promesa bill almost felt like a quid pro quo. Like, hey, te doy esto y me das esto. Right? Deal making. This is kind of what I hear in what Ed was saying.
Right.
But mega big time political deal making with millions of dollars, with Disney, with the top levels of the Democratic Party, you know, including Barack Obama, who actually had a hand in the kind of at least the editing of the play itself, which he used as his swan song, his song to go out. So
and Roberto, I think when you told me that, I had never heard that, read it. So that in itself is like, oh, all right, okay. and then on top of it, we have two Congress people, right? Jose Serrano and Nydia Velazquez. Jose Serrano hasn't been seen now for years. He's been sick. I don't know what's going on with him. But you know, the hypocrisy of Congresswoman Nydia Velazquez, right, to stand next to Barack Obama when Promesa signed, and then a year later be crying on TV about how the United States is treating Puerto Rico. And she's crying because Trump is the president. And it's almost like these Democrats, especially most of these black and brown ones, they don't have a problem with the American presidency. They just happen to have a problem that their person's not the president.
Can I give you an example from immigration?
Yeah.
So one of the things that motivated me to get it, to kind of start studying and looking at the legacy and the trajectory of Lin-Manuel Miranda and his father, the Latino Victory Fund, groups like Families Belong Together. Look them up. It's a group founded by, I researched in my journalism work. It was founded by 10 people, 7 of whom were either Obama staff, Obama campaign staff, or Obama administration staff, or Clinton campaign staff. 7 of 10. So this organization that basically organized those 200 or so events around the United States we saw in 2018 around child separation were actually kind of a front group for the Democratic Party, because I could tell, because there were no Central Americans in any of those 200 events, basically. I caught all my allies around the country. So when I see the Democratic Party like trot out Lin-Manuel Miranda to then denounce Trump and sing to the imprisoned, separated, and caged children, I know something's up, right? Because I've been on this story for 30 years, right? The refugee issue isn't just yesterday. It's from like U.S. policy in Central America, and it's just cycles of degradation and degenerate policy. So when I saw them trot out Lin-Manuel Miranda, I go, aha, what's up with this? And I looked into it and I realized, oh my God, where was Lin-Manuel Miranda when they were caging children under the Obama administration?
Right.
Where was Lin-Manuel Miranda when 3,000 men, women, and small children died in the deserts of Sonora and southwestern United States? Brillaron por su ausencia. They shined for their absence. Where were Lin-Manuel Miranda, Joe Biden, Joaquin Castro, members of the Black Caucus, with some exceptions, where were they when Obama was doing all of this to children, killing children whose bones I've seen, whose bodies I've smelled in the morgues and in the medical examiner's office? So this stinks of high hell. So that's kind of what motivated me, because I knew from Promesa, from immigrant rights, that kind of like, that doesn't see a continuum from Obama to Trump, but it sees Obama was more compassionate when he caged children. That's the kind of crap they're going to want you to believe. And I think that's what they want us to believe about Alexander Hamilton. Yeah. I encourage your audience to look up and see, did Alexander Hamilton buy Black bodies? Did he sell Black souls? Did he endanger and help destroy Black lives? That's a certifiable fact. Whether you go to the archives in Harvard or anywhere else, that's a certifiable fact. Nobody, not even today's New York Times, denied it in a story. So why is it cool to be a slave a person who traffics in enslaved humans if you got hip hop behind it? Right. Is that the key, or is it something else?
And all the characters are Black, and so that was apparently like super revolutionary. And Ed, I wonder what you think now, right? Because already we have seen the state quickly realign to the protester, right? We have seen the police propaganda of now, like, all of a sudden you are kneeling and caring about us, but you're gouging people's eyes and you're tear gassing and all these military tactics. And you see the capitalists really like, I mean, I was talking to my sister who keeps track, and she was telling me that just in the last month, there has been over $1.6 billion that corporations have given to essentially 7 groups in the United States. They are not grassroots. Of course, one of them is Black Lives Matter and Color Change and Movement for Black Lives and other organizations. And, I'm going to get shit for saying it, but it's public, it's real, it's not hidden. It's how do you take money from Amazon and then say that, you love Black Lives Matter if Black workers don't matter? It's just so quickly how capitalism is using all the propaganda and realigning. In all the work that you've done, especially as it regards Puerto Rico and the protests that happened last year, but then quickly we now have Wanda Velazquez and Promesa just keeps getting more, I guess, not solidified might not be the right word, but all the court cases really keep lifting up Promesa as what's going to run Puerto Rico. Like, what are you saying with that? And can you tell people who might not have a full understanding of what Promesa is and how we've already seen the, quote, Puerto Rican progressives realign quickly with the Democratic Party elite in this country?
Yeah. Well, a lot of things to unpack. First, I wanted to mention, just to add to what Rob said, that you can actually find all the Hamilton archives online without even like a university password or anything. I tried to find some links for the article like that, because if I put these links that you needed a university password, then people couldn't read them. And there's a lot of stuff. I mean, there's stuff like he wrote a letter complaining that the British had taken these Black people to be in the army, and that they should give them back because they're property of Americans. So I mean, that he did a lot of and a lot of slave transactions for the Schuyler family. But also another thing I want to, before I get to the thing about Puerto Rico, like the co-opting is a really heavy thing that's going on, and it's true. It's really surprising how it happened so fast, but it's really, it almost started like, remember the Nike gave Colin Kaepernick like this deal, they were almost starting really, and then it's funny because it's through sports, because sports has so much money and there's so many Black and brown people in it. And so they were starting on that thing. Yeah.
And Ed, I don't know if you know, but today, Colin Kaepernick signed a big deal with Disney. Today.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's wild, like, I mean, big ups to Colin Kaepernick, I don't mean to criticize him so much, but I mean, it's amazing how people seize on these things. And also before I get to Puerto Rico, one of the things that I had in the Latinx book was I talked about this neoliberal multiculturalism, which is the idea of promoting this elite of people of color to be in positions in society. And it's really all happened already, like on the level of politics, on the level of education, even public intellectuals now are being recognized who are people of color. And it's basically this idea of allowing for the presence of people of color without making any significant change to the exploitative system. And again, that's what Hamilton does, and it's like one of the things I was reading is that like Hamilton followed this thing that John Locke did, the British philosopher of the 18th century, or actually the 17th century, where he talked about like slavery is really bad, but property is the main thing, and he actually followed that in his logic in terms of why he allowed the South to continue to have slaves, because that was the primary thing he should protect. But what's going on in Puerto Rico with Promesa is a lot of weird stuff. I mean, the two of the people on the board resigned. I don't know if you know about that. It's going to be effective. The leader of the board and one of the main people in Promesa, in the Fiscal Oversight Management Board, that's going to take an effect in August and September. So now there's this whole thing where in Congress, they're trying to say that Nancy Pelosi has the right to name their replacements because there's a Democratic majority now. There was a Republican majority when they did Promesa. And then Raul Grijalva has put out this proposal to amend Promesa with these sort of cosmetic things. When I think, again, it's that thing about reform versus, radical reconstruction of institutions. And, that's really what's going on. And Puerto Rico is in real turmoil now. I don't know, but like the governor has this huge scandal now again, and they're going to go to the streets on Thursday. There was apparently this special investigator that was investigating her because of when they found that huge van or truck thing full of supplies during the earthquake, and she said she didn't know anything about it, and so there's like 6 investigations going on, and she fired her Secretary of Justice or Attorney General. It's as if Trump just fired his Attorney General because he was doing 6 investigations on him. And so I don't know what's going to happen in Puerto Rico now in terms of whether the governor is going to be forced out. But everybody in Puerto Rico is really just fed up with the Fiscal Oversight Management Board, because what it's done is like it's basically destroyed the democratic process in Puerto Rico, because none of the people who can run for office say, I'm going to push through this legislation or I'm going to get this or that, because it all has to go through the Fiscal Oversight Management Board. They're the ones who make all the final decisions on the budget. So it's led to this incredible cynicism among people in Puerto There and I don't know what's going to happen with Promesa. It's kind of interesting, like Trump is way behind the polls. There could be he could be removed. I know that he plans to stay in, but with a Democratic administration and a Democratic Congress, I can imagine that what they won't get rid of Promesa. They won't get rid of the Fiscal Oversight Management Board. What they want to do is they want to bring in this a debt audit process, which is what they should have done 4 years ago, and which I don't know what kind of impact it's going to have, because they've already made these deals with general obligation bonds and the sales tax bonds. So, you know, and they're privatizing the electric company. So, you know, as we speak, even though this slow reform process is going on, I mean, Puerto Rico is rapidly, you know, enduring like 5 or 6 different crises, and it's being privatized, and, you know, people are leaving, and the education system is falling apart, health system is falling apart. So it's really tough. But, you know, I got to give it up to the people who are still there, who are still fighting, and there's a lot of people who are really politically motivated, and they're willing to take to the streets. And like I wrote in the Nation for that piece, like it's kind of like an intersectional nationalism, where they're finally solving a lot of these problems that happened in the old left, where there was sexism and homophobia, and there's a lot of women who are in the front, a lot of LGBTQ people in the front, and it's exciting and it's promising. I think that some of that is happening in the U.S. You know, I went down there to the Occupy City Hall thing, and you know, it's different from Occupy Wall Street. I'll say that. You know, there's a lot more people of color there. So I do think that you know, the way that the protests are going in the U.S. was predicted by what happened in Puerto Rico, but I don't think it's really because they had to look at Puerto Rico to figure it out. I think it was just all bubbling on the surface.
Yeah, and I mean the protests last year, you know, when I was there, it was so incredible because it was led by the feminist collective. It was led by, you know, Black Puerto Ricans from who usually will self-contain in Loíza, so they don't have to deal with the racism in San Juan or other parts. People from La Pela, the mutual aid, the really like renaming in the streets, you know, like we crossing this is not Colonial Eto, it's now Liberation Road, and, you know, but also bringing in culture, you know, and it was the week I was there, and one of the biggest protests that ever happened on the island of Puerto Rico was you could see how young people, much like young people here, are now reckoning. Let's say like white Puerto Ricans are reckoning with maybe some of the privilege they have, where white kids here right now in this movement are not like, oh, well, don't say that. I'm not that kind of white person. They're like, no, we are, because we've all systematically have privilege because our whiteness has brought that.
The big stuff.
You know, and the thing too with Puerto Rico is that, you know, I want to know more about this case, and I want to bring you back later for just a discussion on the corruption within the Secretary of Education and the FBI raids, where they finally arrested Julie Keller, who has a long, sordid history and really has tried to destroy the education system in Puerto Rico. Well, Roberto, your memoir is called Unforgetting, you know, and I love that title, because obviously what it alludes to is that everything here is to make us forget who we are, what has been done to us, but also to make us forget that even though we may be oppressed, we always resist. That's just who we are as a people. So what was the process like writing the memoir in this time, you know? And then for you, I mean, you really did deal in the 80s and seeing so much carnage in El Salvador and in Central America. And I think that's something that our movements really still lack, having a real robust conversation about the carnage that the United States imposed on Central America for decades and continues to.
Thank you for asking about that. It's I actually got the idea of the title from, I hate to quote the Greeks, but sometimes they're useful. So there's a concept called aletheia, which basically means forgetting, not forgetting. And the Greeks associated forgetting with death, for example, with two things. One, with death, where you would go into the underworld, and before you went to Hades or Elysium, you had to forget who you were. And they also associated the recuperation of memory with truth. And so for me, whether it's as an individual, as a Salvadoreño, but also as a person born in the United States, because I'm not from down there. Like I've had to tell people interview me, hey man, don't tropicalize me, dude. I grew up on Folsom Street, down street from the projects in San Francisco. So I'm not some like tropical exotic thing, even though I participated in kind of radical movements down there. And so I came up with the idea for Unforgetting because I think for me, I mentioned the term earlier, I'll mention it again. The key to our success right now is not just physical, but it's intangible. It's our political imagination. I think if we can liberate our political imaginations of things like the ideology that informs Hamilton, we will start building even more powerful emancipatory movements, liberation movements. Liberation movements have always had a very strong ideological, imaginative component. They're necessary. When you're going to have a bullet fly by you, or you're going to have people pursuing you, like death squads that pursued me, you're going to need to know, why the hell am I doing this? And that's your beliefs. So you have to, and the thing we don't realize is that the reason Trump and his neo-fascist allies, one of the main reasons is ideological. They're like motivated by the gospel of Jesus Christ, their interpretation, right? They're motivated. They're way more motivated than the people that are behind Biden right now.
Yeah.
So they use like things like Hamilton or, you know, these singers, these actors to kind of come in and try to inject blood into the zombie. Fuck it, it's dead. Why are you trying to put blood in the zombie, dude? Like, it's over. So move on. So we need to be the ones to move on. And so I wrote the book as an example of what it means for me to move on beyond forgetting. Because remember that when you have, whether it's a death squad operatives that I've interviewed, whether it's military people that I've talked to, whether it's LAPD Rampart that helped give birth to the Salvadoran gangs,
right? Whether
it's a gang member themselves, you have to have a certain level of amnesia, of no memory, to become one of these troops, to go kill and die for reasons you don't even know. People kill and die for reasons they don't even know. And at that point, you know, you start getting, cognitive dissonance. You're separated from your humanity. It's divided. So I think we need to fight the cultural fight, bringing it back to like to Hamilton and the play and Disney and the Democratic Party. They operate in a continuum right now. They operated as an effective unit. And you're seeing it in the elections, and you're going to see it crank up soon. You'll start seeing all these Hollywood people and everybody rally, not just against Trump and for Biden, but if Biden is elected, you're going to see kind of the Obamification again, because this was really perfected in the Obama era, where you had all these manufacturers of the political imagination working to cover up, to get people to actually be saying, "Si se puede," while Obama was caging children, wrapping them in foil, putting them in concentration camps, pushing their parents to their awful deaths in the deserts, militarizing the border, entire communities like El Paso and others, and destroying countries like El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, that are the main migrant-sending countries, right? So, you know, this cultural stuff, this imaginary stuff, this ideological stuff matters in a very fundamental way, which is why I'm really grateful for you to for organizing this, Rosa, because I know the power of the imagination.
Yeah, and at the end of your book, Ed, under the acknowledgments, you say, "I was born in New York and maintain the profile of a typical first-generation Nuyorican, a halting deployment of the Spanish language, the tendency to see Puerto Rico as a tourist, and a lack of familiarity with local politics and customs. Out of this came a desire to break the Isleno diaspora binary and find ways to write a coherent narrative about the Puerto Rican experience that builds a bridge between the two. And I think the time that we're at and what Roberto just said about the political imagination and what you're saying is that, and we have to write these narratives, or the narratives do end up becoming these plays or these like fun fantasy movies. In fact, there's this movie my dad told me to watch. I said, I don't watch Mel Gibson movies. And then what it is, Mel Gibson is in Puerto Rico during the hurricane, protecting like corrupt cops while the hurricane is happening. And my father's like, Mira, but he don't like Jewish people. He don't like Black people. Who let him make a movie in Puerto Rico? And I was like, Dad, it's it's Hollywood. But the idea that not only that Steven Spielberg has made West Side Story and is going to release it at the end of the year. And you're thinking, dude, it's 2020 and you thought it was good to redo West Side Story, which for your generation, Ed, and my dad's and even mine has literally stereotyped us as knife-wielding, lazy Puerto Ricans that can't talk right or don't go to school. What do you think is about to happen though within the context of the electoral season? Because we all saw when everybody said that there was no way Trump was going to win, and then how Roberto, you said zombies, right? Like that's exactly what Biden looks like. But also, thinking about the Barack Obama administration, when I see so much of the militarized police, right? Like it was under Obama that Black Lives Matter had to start because of he militarizing the police. That now where like in LA, they have tanks, and grenade launchers before they have more teachers or counselors. And even though young people are definitely really moving on this defund the police, which is probably, I think, the most exciting part of all of this, is you're really defunding capitalism. Do you think that there's a possibility that Trump could win given the voter suppression and the lack of any hype with Biden?
Yeah.
Can we be here for another 4 years?
That's a great question. I think it's definitely it's within the realm of possibility that either he wins or there's some kind of thing that what happened in 2000 with one state that, or even two states that are disputed that gets resolved in kind of a funny way, or it being close enough and he tries not to leave. And I don't know, it might even come down to the Supreme Court of the military backing him up. But I do think that there's a very strong likelihood if Biden says very little and Trump continues down this path, I think a lot of the people who were on the fence that voted for Trump are not going to vote for him again this time. But then we're stuck like with the same problem like we would have been if Clinton won, which is that the economic system is problematic. It's constantly going into crises. There's worldwide famine. There's the climate change problem, climate crisis problem. So people really have to be aware. Another thing that you were talking about with police reform is some people are advocating for this thing of like Camden, New Jersey. And I read a really interesting article in Jacobin the other day about how what they did in Camden was really like put in a lot of surveillance and people sort of telling what's going on in the neighborhood. And it's not as rosy as they're painting it. You're going to see I'm sure you're going to see liberal candidates for mayor in New York advocating for that. They already have this stop shot thing. I don't know if people have heard of that, or I forget if I'm getting the name right, but it's some kind of detection system. And every time a gun goes off, there's the police know about it. and they've been touting that as a way. And the problem is that the people. It's not that people are committing crimes. It's like, why are people committing crimes? Why are people in these neighborhoods that are completely underfunded? Why is there no opportunity for these people? There's no addressing of the fundamental problem. And then the other thing I want to say, I think it's really important what Roberto's book is about, and we really got to take a look at what happened in Central America for the precise reason that, the neoliberal multiculturalism, where you get people of color to get bought off into American exceptionalism, the best way to fight that is really to talk about foreign policy, because foreign policy is where the whole thing breaks down. Because you can say, all right, I'm going to fight so that everybody in the U.S. is okay, and you might have some really progressive goals about free education and everything like that. But if you're going to go, and if the way you're going to maintain that is by, doing this military occupation and extraction of wealth from the rest of the world, it's just, what is that for? I mean, that's just to reproduce this American exceptionalism that is, going to pay a steep, the rest of the world is paying a steep price because of this. So it's really important for people not to get bought off by progressive change in the U.S. and continuing to push for, real change in U.S. foreign policy and the way that global capital is extracting resources and just literally starving people all around the world.
Yeah, and Roberto, I just read this article by Malkia Sorrell, that used to be the executive director at the Center for Media Justice, about the facial recognition. And there's already been like these 3 cases of Black men who, were picked up. They said it was facial recognition. It took 3 days and all of that to happen. So we have, one of my professors, Dr. Turner, always said that it was not police just looking, like police are there to surveil us. And they are always, the technology will always end up helping the police in their surveillance tactics. But in the question about Trump, because we've seen so much of what has happened in other countries around canceling elections, do you think that's a possibility? Could he just be like, no, I'm just going to cancel it? And
if I may speak to the question of surveillance you raised?
Yes.
Because my first beat as a journalist was electronic surveillance. And I did that in order to kind of be different, because usually they expect Latinos to write about, stuff that I actually wrote about in my book: immigration, gangs, and family. Right. That's the whole canon of Latino literature in one thing, right? That's all you can write about. But really, like Ed, we have to appreciate Ed's trajectory, because he's managed to open up spaces for himself and for us that expand the political imagination of what's possible as a Latino writer. So I noticed that, Ed. Thank you. And so I said I'm going to write about electronic surveillance. So, so the white editors would be like, oh, wow, here's a Latino guy who knows about surveillance. Well, why do I know about surveillance? Because, as you'll see in my book, the Salvadoreños were surveilled by the FBI. Mm-hmm. And organizations that Salvadorans created, like the Committee on Solidarity with the People of El Salvador, were heavily surveilled by like 50 offices of the FBI. It was like the tail end of COINTELPRO. So like my book's about the US as well. And it's not just a dark story. It's about, it's actually an inspiring story, because I don't have a bullet in my head. All the stuff that I've seen in my life and that I inherited from my Salvadoran family, right? I should have a bullet in my head. I don't say that lightly. I pondered it in my younger days, in my crazier days. But no, I am alive, kicking and fighting, at this late stage of my game. So yeah, the surveillance of the state, you got to remember, is primarily private now. It's not like I've written about the way that the Big Brother metaphor, for example, is an inadequate metaphor for a time. I mean, the Big Brother metaphor is like centralized state surveilling you with the big eye, right? Like in Orwellian times. Now you have decentralized surveillance through the private sector, so that the private sector has become the primary purveyor of surveillance material and information to the government. So the government becomes kind of the data miner, the processor of of information. And that's kind of the secret now, is to process all the information, as Edward Snowden and others have pointed out. So is it, to your question, is it possible? Yes, it's possible. I mean, some people have a problem with the term. I'm seeing kind of like a Latino Americanization of the United States, right? You have concentration of wealth that surpasses that in Latin America, right? The division between rich and poor surpassed that in America Latina. The emptying out, the hollowing out of the welfare state, right, which we used to have in the United States,
Right.
you know, and so you hollow that out, and the increased militarization via not just the police, but through ICE, right, through alcohol, tobacco, firearms, through private sector like Blackwater and other, you know, these are all like kind of taking what the empire learned in the colonies and bringing it back as we colonize within the borders of the United States. So yeah, that it's entirely possible we will get a kind of like a coup type dictatorship. I would like to know what the conversation between the elites that are behind both Trump and Obama, the people that keep, for example, 1,000 military bases around the world, regardless of who's president. Where's the debate on 1,000 military bases? I don't know. Did they talk about that in Hamilton? I don't know. Maybe I missed that part, but you know, we're not debating the existence of the necessity of 1,000 military bases, of nuclear weapons that are a bane on humanity, of a military budget that is greater than that of most of the competitors combined. So while we're not so.
Yeah, and all this now, you know, because we have to wrap up, and I want both of you to have a couple last words, but all this now, and still this COVID crisis, and the New York Times today finally released this racial report, right? That we've known this, that it is now Latinos that are 3 times not only getting the COVID but dying from it. For Black folks, it's 10 times, and I think I was talking to two of my friends who are both doctors. One and we had him on earlier, trained in Cuba, now is in the Bronx, and this other brother that's in New Orleans. And what they've been sending me is what people are not talking about is, yes, people are surviving, but they're in like their lung function is down, their memory and the ability for them to talk has been impaired. Even their ability to walk has been impaired. So they have all these kind of like, yeah, you made it, and COVID, and you're good. And it's going to impact the entire rest of your life, along with all the other pre-existing conditions and stuff of poverty. So first, to you, Ed, when you go into the classroom, whatever that might look for us, you know, are we going to be online? Are there going to be college? Yeah. Are students just going to be like, what the fuck's the point? You know, I don't go to college. I don't pay money to see my great professor, Professor Morales or Professor Clemente. I also go there for the experience. What do you say in those first day of classes to let young people know, like, you know, lack of a better term right now, history is definitely here, and you're in it or you're not? What do you think that's going to be like? And to end with you, Roberto, as the book is coming out and we continue to push more, which I will bring you on both as soon as we can, because I really want to keep talking to you about other stuff. And Roberto, to end with why you think it's important that we do keep pushing this petition and really hit on the culture piece, as it is propaganda that can be used against us. But yeah, Ed, what do you think your students are going to hear from you those first couple of days?
Yeah, well, I already, you know, I taught the whole last half of last semester online already. So, I mean, and we were dealing with that. And basically what I had said was, you know, that this COVID crisis has, you know, it's for people like you and me and Roberto, it's not a surprise. But I mean, the COVID crisis has exposed a lot of, really the way that we have been discriminated against by the system. It's taken away all of the nice little, distractions and covering up of what reality is. And, it's a chance to show how, we can think with each other and care about each other and, not be indifferent to each other's struggles. And so I gave a lot of time for people to talk about, rather than get into the class material, talk about what they're going through, like if they had to go back, live with their parents, if they were at Columbia, and if they were, I also took CUNY, now that your brothers and sisters, or maybe you're adult and your spouse, lost your job, so I had people just talk about that, because, that's like real. And that's what the reason why we're doing ethnic studies, or, I also teach journalism. So that's the kind of message that I try to bring. But also in this semester, I think, especially because there has been a lot of dialogue about Afro-Latinx people and the erasure of Afro-Latinx people from notions of Latinidad. And even though I try to talk about that in my class, I'm going to center it even more in my classes. I'm rewriting some of my syllabi to really question. Before I felt like people had a notion of what Latinidad was, and so I was just going to teach it. And so now I really want to question what it means. Talk about new terminology like BIPOC, or Black, Indigenous, people of color, whether that should be replacing the idea of Latinidad, whether it's feasible to think of being Black and Indigenous and Latinx at the same time. So I think that a lot of what's happened, even just with the Black Lives Matter movement, is that so many conversations about race and labels that don't really show the complexities or actually the neglect that people suffer under labels that are supposed to represent them. I want to have a much stronger discussion of that in the semester that's coming up.
And I'd love to be part of that. That's all my academic work is all about, Black, Latinx identity. I am pushing heavily back in my dissertation around just this concept of Latinidad, and this kind of narrative that I don't like, and is completely ahistorical, this idea that it is Latinos as a whole who apparently are now the most anti-Black people ever. And you're like, what do you like? Do we have to go back to Schomburg and Garvey and John Henry Clark? Yeah. And, culturally, Celia Cruz. I mean, maybe problematic in Cuban politics, but this idea that it's now us as this group of people that keep being identified. We don't call ourselves these names. They're imposed on us. They take away our indigeneity. They take away our Blackness. And now we're the most anti-Black. As isn't Clarence Thomas anti-Black? And Condoleezza Rice? I'm like, what does that mean? So I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. I want to come in your class and speak. And I just want everybody to know that Ed, before Fantasy Island, have written Latinx, the New Force in American Politics and Culture, which I've been using very heavy in the dissertation. And so, Roberto, I'll let you have the last word. I mean, obviously, we're going to keep moving forward and do what we do. What would be your advice if you're talking to someone younger, or you're in this revolutionary radical space? What does that mean, and what does it have to look like now in 2020?
I mean, honestly, I love this word, unforget. Don't forget. Don't let the system manufacture forgetting for you. Because I believe at a deep subconscious level, the greatest power we have lies below levels of awareness. And it's covered over in lies. I mean, that's why I don't like Hamilton. It's a lie. Alexander Hamilton bought and sold enslaved Africans. There's no way around that. You can't deny it. You like the music, you like the lyrics, you like that there are people of color in it, or BIPOC people, but you can't deny the fact that Alexander Hamilton bought black bodies and enslaved black souls, and he endangered and destroyed black lives. You can't deny it. There's no way. It's certifiable fact. So we have to unforget these things, because then we are allowed to act as subjects in our own liberation rather than objects of false liberation promoted in an American Revolution like in Hamilton. So just to give you an example, I'm actually really grateful to you, Rosa. I just realized as I was listening and waiting to speak was that this is like a trial run for me. I haven't really been out. People know me as a commentator, as a leftist, a critic, but nobody knows that I was a revolutionary. I only came out here, and I haven't even started until September. And so I've had to forget a part of myself that is one of the most important parts, the part that has the highest ideals to the point where I risk my life, right? I had to make a decision to overcome the fear of forgetting, because I didn't forget physiologically. I forgot in practice. I wasn't able to be public about having belonged to a movement that sought to overthrow a US-backed government, because we were surveilled by the FBI. We were pursued by death squads in El Salvador and in the United States. And the Puerto Rican liberation movement has similar stuff. Ed knows this, you know this, Rosa. I mean, so in the Salvadoreño case also. So like, I had to forget that I was radical in a public way, the way I was really radical. And I decided to unforget. And I think that is one of the most important things we can do is really get to know who we were and who we were through our ancestors, who we were through our social movements, who we were before we were educated, right? And and then once you have that, then the spirit's going to carry the day, and you'll be able to be like all those militaries that have defeated the United States time and time again, less equipped, like the Vietnamese, or in El Salvador or Nicaragua, having machetes, cutting up pineapples, making bombs out of that. Like these are the spiritual nurturance that they fear most, because that one makes it possible. That's why I talk a lot about political imagination. So I just leave you with a lot of love and an incitement to political imagination and to unforget. And thank you, Rosa. And thank you, Ed, for your work.
Yeah, and and of course, we'd never forget our political prisoners. From Jalil to Sundiata to David Gilbert, who 55 years, some of them. We had some have come out, and it's been incredible. It's incredible to be able to talk to Sekou Odinga, and what I find fascinating is like, you can't say Black Lives Matter if you're leaving RPPs and prisoners of war behind, if you're leaving 70-year-old men behind to just die in upstate New York. And for everybody, just know that you can go to Somos Presente to see our petition. Please circulate it. We're going to be moving on the campaign about Hamilton. We're going to keep moving and being even more politically righteous around it. Please pre-order what I know is going to be an incredible memoir from Roberto, and read all of Ed's articles, as well as his book Latinx and Fantasy Island. And just a shout out, which I don't normally promote my t-shirts, but this is Palestinians Support the Black Intifada. And that's from our sister Nancy, who has done incredible work with Existence is Resistance. You can also see Police Murder People. And I think we have to now even be more forceful in making sure that our Palestinian brothers and sisters still stay in the forefront of the struggle, because when Ferguson rebelled, they were there in struggle, far away. And when Black Lives Matter this last month, they've also been there. And with this annexation that is happening and the issue of policy and things that are just happening underneath our noses, like Trump is the clown that everybody watches, while Israel is literally now annexing more and more land. So Palestinian people stand with us, and we should always stand with them. I thank you both for your time. I thank everybody. This was an hour and a half. And the thing about this, we can do shows like this. We're not sponsored by any corporation, nor will we be. I really want to thank my producer, Tandi. If anybody wants to hit us up, volunteer, donate, you could do all of that. We're going to keep bringing on guests. Tomorrow, we're going to have Dr. Cornel West. That's going to be just fabulous in 9 million ways. And then on Thursday, we're going to have Dr. Jarrett Ball, who has just written a book, The Myth of Black Buying Power, which is interesting because today is the day of Black Buying Power. So all day today, you heard Black and Latino capitalists saying we're worth $1 trillion in the GDP, so we should have respect. And actually, Dr. Jarrett Ball in his book, The Myth of Black Buying Power, smashes this whole Black and Hispanic buying power theory, and he'll be on with us on Thursday. So Dr. Cornel West tomorrow, and Thursday will be Jarrett Ball, and we'll keep bringing great guests. We hope that everybody stays safe, wear your masks. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay up. We'll see you in the whirlwind. Thank you both for your time. I appreciate you both. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rosa and Ed. Bye.
Yeah, thanks. Good night. Great to be with you.
Bendición. Gracias.
Hasta pronto.